Welcome back to the MVP of Personal Injury Law. I'm Kara, and today I'm here with Chelsee Sachs from MVP Accident Attorneys. Good to see you today, Chelsee. Thanks for being here.
Oh, it's great to see you too, Kara.
Awesome. Today we are talking about how to file a car accident claim in Irvine and the common mistakes that can wreck a claim before it even gets started. So we're going to cover what to do at the scene, how California's pure comparative negligence system actually works, the deadlines that can end a case permanently, dealing with insurance companies, and the mistakes that hurt people the most, whether the crash happens on the I-405, the I-5, the CA 133, or anywhere in Orange County. This episode is for you. The first few minutes after a crash are the most important and also most disorienting. So what should someone do in the first few minutes of a car accident in Irvine to protect their claim?
So the first thing you should do is make sure you're okay. Safety first, always. Check your body, make sure you don't have cuts and bruises, make sure you're not bleeding or there's nothing, God forbid, that's maybe stuck in your body, right? When we hit things or move around, sometimes that can happen. Check your head, make sure again that you're not bleeding, there's kind of nothing there, and just assess your overall body. A lot of times you might even be in shock and you might not realize it. Obviously, you won't necessarily know it, but definitely do a check around and a check with anyone else in your vehicle. Especially if you're traveling with kids, a lot of people, we take our family members, make sure they're okay. Hi, just a check in, talk to me, make them say a word, make sure everyone has said, I'm okay. Because that just means that they're alive, right? And that's our number one thing. We want to make sure everyone's okay in the car. If they are not okay, immediately, whoever can, call 911. If they are okay, then make sure the next step is to look around, see where you are, see where you've gotten hit, and see where you can get to somewhere safely to move over and then check your vehicle, exchange insurance information, and do the rest of the things that we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. And then Orange County has 3 different law enforcement agencies that could respond to a single crash depending on where it happens. So which agency actually responds to a car accident depending on where it happens in Orange County?
So that's a great question. In California, I think everyone's probably seen the signs. They now have those digital billboards, which is basically, if you're in an accident, pull over. That's number one. We want to make sure you pull over. Any law enforcement agency is going to want you to be safe. And that's why they tell you to do that. They don't want you to get hit or something else worse, again, by standing in the middle of the street. So if it's safe to pull over. The agencies also don't necessarily respond like they did 20, 30 years ago, even 10 years ago. We've seen a change in the fact that most agencies are only responding if you report injuries. So that means some kind of clear injury that you can identify, a tangible thing. But the agencies that are going to respond, it depends exactly like you said where you are. So if you're on the highway, if you're traveling on the 405, the 5, like you said, the 133, the 73, the 91, anywhere like that, it's going to be the California Highway Patrol, CHP. They are our highway patrolmen. Thank God for them. And they come and they are actually incredibly great at coming to the scene of an accident. They really want to make sure that everyone's safe. They want to make sure that the highway is safe and that you're good. So always reach out to the CHP and they would respond if you're on any marked highway. Ortega Highway, same thing. Then, of course, you have another wonderful agency, the Orange County Sheriff. So they're going to respond in all types of different places where you're not on a highway. They're also going to respond in a lot of unincorporated territories. I know that sounds like a strange verbiage, but like many other areas in California, Orange County actually has a lot of unincorporated territories, meaning you're not really in a city. The first one that comes to mind is Rancho Mission Viejo. That's down in South Orange County. They don't have their own police department. So that's going to be the Orange County Sheriff that's going to respond to you. And they're wonderful. And then we also have any local police department who could respond. So let's say you're in Irvine. Irvine, of course, is a city. They're going to have their own actual police department, such as the Irvine Police Department. Same thing with the Newport Beach Police Department. So you can have a number of either the police departments locally, the Orange County Sheriff's Department, or of course, the California Highway Patrol.
Yeah, absolutely. And then a lot of people walk away from a crash in Irvine feeling fine and assume that they don't need a doctor. So where should someone in Irvine go for the medical care right after a crash, even if they feel fine?
So that's a great question. I think kind of like we said, after an accident, your body is definitely in shock. There's studies I can't even count how many studies there are about your body just trying to be in that fight or flight mode. And you really should get checked out. Even if you don't think something's really wrong, you really don't know. I recommend a number of different options. Depending on what you're feeling, or if you're feeling nothing, you should always still go to an urgent care. If you can get in your primary care doctor who's seen you before, like your MD or nurse practitioner, or always, of course, there's an emergency room if you feel something, or a chiropractor if you've seen them before. Obviously, I like to say if you really don't know if you've been injured and you're trying to report that you've been into an accident and you get checked out, an urgent care or a primary care doctor are the best places to go.
And then most people don't realize that there's a separate state filing on top of the police report. Does California require you to file something with the state on top of the police report after a car accident?
Absolutely. So a police report actually isn't required. It's recommended, and it's recommended because obviously you have to document that something happened. People could walk around all day long. They don't, but they could say things like, oh, I was in an accident. And that's what the insurance companies say. They say, oh, we don't really know that you were involved in an accident. And you're, wait, what? Why would I make that up? That's insane. And it is. So having the police report helps to ensure that you're documenting the accident happened. It also helps to make sure that, again, everyone's safe and that the parties are actually exchanging insurance information like they're supposed to under the law. But California absolutely requires what we call an SR1 form and then an SR19 form. So those are two different forms that you have to fill out and send back to the state. When you hire a lawyer like MVP accident attorneys, they do that for you. So that's another great way and reason to hire an attorney, because there is a bunch of underlying paperwork that you might not even know and actually could get your license suspended or worse if you don't fill it out and send it into the state properly.
Wow. And then most people don't know how fault actually works under California law. So how does California's fault-based insurance system actually work for car accident claims?
So I will say I actually feel very blessed that we're in California. California has a comparative negligence. We're a comparative negligence state, but there are states where if you're found to be 50% negligent or 51%, that means you don't recover at all. Luckily, that's not California. California does have comparative negligence, which means we have, let's take a whole, which is 100%. And that would be that one person is 100% negligent. If you're, let's say 20% negligent, maybe you're 75% negligent, whatever that number is, it really just reduces your damages by that number, but you're still allowed to recover for the remaining amount. So if you're found to be 50-50, you can recover, let's say, the California minimum policy is $30,000. Let's say you're 50% negligent. They would then be required to pay you the $15,000, and you would not have to pay anyone that other $15,000. You just wouldn't recover that because you were also at fault. But again, because we're in California, we're very lucky that you actually can still recover something, because a lot of states say you are at fault even by a little bit, you're out.
So most drivers don't realize how low the California minimum coverage actually is. What are California's minimum auto insurance limits, and why are they almost always too low for an Irvine crash?
California's auto insurance minimums are $30,000, $60,000, $15,000. And what that means, there's three different numbers there, is $30,000 per person, per incident, $60,000 per occurrence, and $15,000 for property damage. So what that means is essentially if you're involved in an accident and the person has a minimal policy limit, and let's say you're the only person in your vehicle and the only person who's injured in the entirety of the accident, the maximum that you could recover from that third party who hit you is $30,000. Now, let's say it was you and another person in your vehicle and you were the only two injured. That would mean that you would both have to share that $60,000 per occurrence. So again, in that example, you would each get up to $30,000. And the issue with that, I know it kind of sounds like $30,000 is a lot of money. Yes, it is if someone was just handing you money. But when you're injured in an accident, there's a lot of things that are happening to you, right? You are injured. You sought medical care. It's potential that you've lost wages, meaning you weren't able to work. And then, of course, you have your pain and suffering, which is the fact of the trauma and other emotional issues related to the accident themselves. So the way that works is it's not actually that much money. We've all been to a hospital. We've all been to doctors. We know how much those cost. And that care is incredibly necessary, especially after a trauma where you want to make sure that you are getting that adequate, well, even better than adequate, that exceptional care. So $30,000 can really be diminished very quickly. And so that's really the problem, right? Most people who live in Irvine, they do well. That's not to say everyone does well, but their vehicles are expensive. If they have to take time off work, their jobs do pay them a very well living wage. And so the amount of money that $30,000 could cover for them probably is not adequate to cover their medical expenses and their time off work. So we like to, and especially let's say if there are multiple people in a car, let's say there's 5 people in a car, that would mean 5 people have to share that up to $60,000. Now, that's not anywhere near $30,000, right? So that's an extremely limited amount of money to pay for even a medical bill, even an emergency room visit. So you really have to think about that the money doesn't go as far as it should. California even increased these limits before. They were $1,530. So we are happy that they increased them. The insurance companies, of course, are saying that's because of bad lawyers. No, it's because people get in accidents and things cost more money, right? We know that. So it's not about lawyers. It's about lawyers understanding how much your medical care costs in real life. And knowing that a lot of insurance companies, by the way, like medical insurance companies, need to be reimbursed. So people will say, I have medical insurance, it's covered. This isn't actually the situation that your medical insurance, when you sign onto it, anticipated covering you for. So medical insurance by California law is entitled to reimbursement. Even programs like Medi-Cal, Medicare, those are all statutorily, meaning by the law, required to have reimbursement from your any kind of auto accident settlement. So even those programs do, again, require reimbursement of some way. Certain plans too with your employer, they're called ERISA plans. Those medical costs also have to have a reimbursement, and those are even at a higher rate. You really have to understand how much the medical care costs and how much, of course, your pain and suffering is worth to understand that those limits are very small. How can you fix this? I'm sure, I don't know if that's where you're going, but how do you fix it? You have your own coverage, which is your own underinsured or uninsured motorist coverage. It's the number one way to protect yourself in an accident. And the best part is, hopefully insurance companies don't catch on to this, what you're paying for coverage, that underinsured, uninsured motorist coverage, is a fraction of the cost of what you're actually starting to pay for with your underlying limits, those California required limits.
This single rule can be the difference between recovering everything and recovering nothing in some states. So what is pure comparative negligence, and how does it change recovery in California compared to other states?
So California is a pure comparative negligence state, which means a party who's injured in a car accident, a slip and fall, or any other kind of personal injury is directly allowed to recover what they are not negligent for, if that makes sense. So essentially, the ability to recover would be 100%, correct? So if one person, the other party, the third party that injured you is 100% negligent, they would be responsible for 100% of your damages. Now, in that same example, in California, since we are a purely comparative negligence state, if you are found 50% negligent, that would mean the third party is only responsible for paying 50% of your total damages, and you would then be responsible for the other remaining 50%. You don't have to pay anyone else that other 50%, but you just don't recover for that 50%. Other states follow different rules. They follow modified comparative negligence rules and other things, which means if you're 50% or 51% at fault, you can't recover at all. So I would say that California, in my opinion, especially as a personal injury attorney, probably has one of the best systems. There's also systems that are no fault states, much like Michigan. I lived there when I went to law school. Still don't understand that. Sorry, love you, Michigan. Do not understand that no fault system. I do appreciate California's comparative negligence.
Yeah. So now what? Walk us through the step-by-step process of filing a car accident insurance claim in Irvine.
So after you've been in an accident, you've documented everything, meaning you have your photographs, you've been to a doctor, that's wonderful. Obviously, I'm going to tell you the first thing you should do is hire an attorney. The reason being is the next step is absolutely communicating with your insurance company. And then likely communicating with the other party's insurance company as well. So because of that process and the way it works, each insurance company is doing their own investigation and their own due diligence to figure out what happened. When we talk about purely comparative negligence that we have in California, which is basically who's at fault and how much fault then and how much damages does one party have to pay, the insurance companies immediately start trying to figure out who's at fault. And that could be actually incredibly damaging to you. Yes, your insurance company is allegedly on your side. Love those commercials, Geico, State Farm, Allstate. But are they? And the issue is no, those wonderful mascots aren't your insurance company talking to you on the phone. And if maybe you have enough proof immediately to show that the other party's at fault, hopefully they'll be on your side. But I can tell you by many examples of insurance companies taking fault for an accident that might not have been one person's fault, or accepting liability when they shouldn't have, or frankly, just denying claims. So you really have to be careful when you're contacting your insurance company. And at first, if you're going to do it by yourself, if you feel that you can do it or you don't want to hire an attorney, of course, that's your prerogative, your choice. Talk to them, explain, this is what happened. This is my accident. This is what happened. And then again, I always say consult with an attorney. If you tell them immediately, I don't feel any damages, or meaning I don't feel any bodily injury right now, and you go out of that state of shock, you then start to feel like injuries to your body, it's very likely they're not going to believe you, and they're not going to believe they're related. So right there, even understanding the science, the physics, the medicine behind why you weren't feeling it, it doesn't matter to an insurance company. They're going to say you're faking it, or it's not from this. So you do have to be really careful, but you definitely have to let your insurance company know in some manner. And that's why we say, hire an attorney. We know how to do it right. We know how to do it to keep you safe.
Yeah. And then most people assume it is just the car repairs and the medical bills. So what type of damages can someone actually recover in an Irvine car accident claim?
There are a lot of different damages that you can recover. Of course, it's your past medical expenses, which would be the medical expenses that you've already occurred. So let's say you have your accident, you're not feeling well, you go directly to an urgent care or hospital. Obviously, those expenses have already occurred. You can get those back. But the other medical expenses you can cover from are future medical expenses. And it's really important to understand your injuries, to understand what kind of care you might need in the future. The other thing, of course, lost wages. If you miss any time of work, you can get those back. Property damage, yes, of course, you can get your property fixed, but not just your vehicle. Sometimes when you're hit, things happen. Sunglasses break, car seats. By California law, if you're in a certain car accident, you have to replace car seats. Those can be replaced as well. But also I've seen phones break. I've seen all kinds of other GPSs, certain things break. You can recover from those too. I've seen unfortunately, bloody stained clothes. You can recover for those. So all the kinds of different actual personal property damage items you have. You can also recover for your pain and suffering. And that's a really big one. A lot of people and a lot of, unfortunately, insurance adjusters, when people are handling a claim themselves, they really don't talk about or give credit to the pain and suffering that someone has gone through when they've gone through a traumatic accident, like any car accident really, especially one where you're pushed into a median, let's say, or your whole backside of your car is crumpled or glass has fallen on you. Those things don't just leave your mind. Right? A lot of people need therapy after that, or they just need to be compensated for what they went through. So you can be compensated for your past pain and suffering, which is, again, the pain and suffering of everything that's already happened. It's even the humiliation of having to go to a doctor, the inconvenience of having to go to the doctor, things like that. And then, of course, much like with medical, your future pain and suffering. If you have to have procedures or you have continued PTSD, now you have to have someone drive you because you can't physically drive, things like that, that can be recovered. Again, depending on how injured somebody is, if they need caregiving services, or let's say they broke their leg, they couldn't attend to their lawn, and so they hired a landscaper for a few months, those expenses can actually even be recovered. So it really just depends on the accident itself, and more importantly, the damages. What has one individual person suffered from? And I think that's the biggest takeaway is everyone's different. So everyone has had a different experience in their accident. Everyone has a different body. Everyone has different injuries. So it's very particularized to that person, but there are many things that you can recover from if those things are happening to you. Because the point of recovering from a personal injury accident is not to make you better off than you were before the accident. It's to make you whole again.
Yeah, that's so important. And it's not just about the accident and what you lost during that, but also the future too, and how that's going to affect your lifestyle. So that's really good to point out. Most people assume the adjuster calling them is there to help. So what should you say, and especially not say, when an insurance adjuster calls after an Irvine crash?
Like I'll say, hire an attorney, because they'll be able to tell you exactly what to say about your accident. We help our clients as we should, and as any attorney will, because some adjusters, listen, not every adjuster is a bad adjuster or a bad person. They're doing their job too. But yes, their job is to assess fault. It's to assess your damages immediately. And it's to understand, again, what they have to pay out. So unfortunately, they do have an interest in not giving you as much money. We've just seen something come down where State Farm is being tagged with denying and delaying in California, the fires. That I wish I could say that was uncommon. It's incredibly common. We literally have duties by insurance companies via California law that says they're not supposed to unfairly deny or delay, but they do. And so you have to understand that your insurance company is not your best friend. They're not your parent. Who they are is a company, is a business, and they are at every time trying to protect that asset, which is themselves. I would say explain that your accident happened, document that it happened. But again, your best bet is to hire an attorney to help you navigate the ins and outs of your specific accident and what you should talk to your adjusters about. And certainly don't talk to the other side's insurance company without having counsel or someone else there to help you.
And then beyond the basics, there is a lot of evidence that can tip the scale, especially in a high traffic county like Orange. What evidence beyond photos and medical records can make or break a claim in Orange County?
So we use a lot of different things depending on essentially what the insurance company or the other side is denying or what they're claiming happened. We can use a lot of other data and information to showcase what happened. There's something called a Switter's report, which if there's let's say, dangerous condition or some kind of area where we're saying that there was a problem that existed that should have been fixed, we can use that. There's dash cams. Actually, so many people have dash cams, and I can't tell you how helpful they are. Videos, most trucking accidents we do, there's always a camera, and that camera is incredibly helpful to show if somebody has actually cut you off or if you unfortunately did veer into their lane, things like that. So dash cams are great. Obviously, a picture says 1,000 words. A video says 1,000,000 it's incredible. We also have all kinds of other data. A lot of people have red light, green light disputes. I will say that's so common. In certain places, we can get the actual trafficking sequence. I mean, we can get the light sequencing. Sometimes that helps. Sometimes it doesn't always showcase exactly what we thought. If there's a light that's blinking or something, you can't always, but there's all kinds of different data like that. There's also all kinds of different reports that we can FOIA requests, other types of data that we can assess around the area in which your accident happened. There's also DMV records. So everyone needs to be pretty careful out there. Your DMV record exists. So if someone's been they're a serial accident causer, we can know that too. Or other things, DUIs, right? There's medical tests. There's oftentimes where maybe in a police report or there wasn't one. Usually in this case there would be, but the police report didn't notate that the other driver was intoxicated. But we have some kind of information that maybe someone smelled alcohol or saw a lot of drug paraphernalia. Everyone was transported to the hospital. We can go and get those records. I can't do that. You can't do that as a layperson, right? That does take a lot of time and effort to get, but there's all kinds of different evidence that we can get to really understand what happened in the accident and put the pieces together too. They also have, I will say, ring cameras. Ring cameras have become increasingly popular. And actually, in neighborhood accidents, we go around, we try and find those cameras to, again, get that video and understand what happened. Same thing with restaurants. If things happen outside of certain places, they have cameras. The possibility of evidence is almost endless. I could just go on and on. But yeah, it's amazing.
Most people don't know how fault actually gets assigned after a crash. How is fault determined in a California car accident claim, and how much does the police report actually carry?
So in California, there are multiple ways to resolve a car accident claim. There's settlement, there is trial, and then a jury verdict. Now, oftentimes, most cases are actually resolved via a settlement. In that case where you are not going to trial and you're not going to have a jury verdict, a lot of times fault would be assessed in a few different ways. It could be assessed by, depending on when you settle, insurance adjusters. It can be determined by someone who's a third party helping, like a mediator. And while they're not bound and determining the actual fault, they might help the parties come to a determination of fault, and then of course come to a resolution. And then of course you have a jury verdict whereby the jury has actually very clearly assigned fault to each party and then provides a verdict based upon that fault. So it just depends on what stage you have your case and what stage it resolves in. In terms of a police report, it just depends on the agency and the actual officers themselves who are responding, what they're going to assess fault. There might be a very clear statement that they've said, like party one is at fault or usually P1 is at fault or V1 is at fault. Or there could be little notations within their report that we utilize to assess fault, such as, let's say party was on cell phone. That's a big deal. That would mean you're distracted. There's likely going to be some fault for there attributed or liability there. Then you have maybe a vehicle code violation. That's something too. So there could be indirect statements that they put in there that they're not actually assessing fault themselves, but they're putting in facts. And then those facts we use to determine liability, and which is fault. The police report itself is helpful. It's helpful for a number of different reasons to showcase what happened, to get some kind of viewpoint of what happened. However, because in a police report, they did not see the accident. These people didn't witness it. They're just responding. And thank goodness they're responding. That police report is technically inadmissible evidence when you get to trial. So what that means is it doesn't just come into evidence and become the lay of the land, right? You have to utilize that facts in certain ways. You have to bring and find other ways to bring in that evidence if you can, or it has to have some kind of underlying exception to be utilized at trial and be rendered admissible.
This is one of those deadlines that can end your case permanently. How long do you have to file a car accident lawsuit in California, and what causes you to lose your right to sue if the deadline passes?
So it depends on your accident, who the potential parties are. Generally speaking, your car accident claim should have 2 years. That is the general personal injury car accident statute of limitations for California. However, there are some massive exceptions that are incredibly important. If you have a claim that could be against a government entity, let's say a government vehicle hit you, or let's say you have a dangerous condition in a government-run territory, then you only have 6 months from the date of the accident to file or send what's called a government claim. That's under the Government Tort Claims Act. It's incredibly strict. There are only very few exceptions, and honestly, that's for a whole nother day. So you have to file that claim within 6 months with that agency. And let's say that there's multiple agencies that could be at fault. You have to file one of those claims with every single one of them to hold that statute. Then from that point in time, there's certain deadlines in which they're allowed to reply, and then you have to file your lawsuit. So the claim in that case would come first, and then a lawsuit would have to come, but it would be 6 months after certain deadlines are met. So if you have any kind of cause of action against any California government entity, it must be 6 months, not a day longer. If it's a general car accident, then it is 2 years. But again, you really have to know who your defendant is and who you believe is at fault, because if you miss that, you cannot recover from those parties.
What should you do if the at-fault driver in Irvine is uninsured or fled the scene?
If someone flees the scene, always call the police. You have to have some kind of agency come and take a report. Other than that, of course, you're going to really hope that you have adequate coverage. So that's your underinsured and uninsured motorist coverage. That would be the only way that you could likely recover if a party has no insurance. Of course, that's pretty simple. They have no insurance. Your insurance is going to have to take over. With that, you have a demand for arbitration, which is much different. You can't actually go to trial against your own insurance company for the underlying claims.
Wow. And then you see people make the same mistakes over and over. So what are the most common mistakes that hurt a California car accident claim the most?
Gosh, social media comes to mind. Social media is hard because, like everyone knows, a picture's worth 1,000 words. People who are injured are people as well. They want to have nice moments. They don't want often to let an accident or an injury define their lives. However, in doing so and in putting things on social media and showcasing these things, it does tend to look as though people aren't injured. So I always tell everyone I know, social media can really hurt you. In a car accident claim, you're asking people to understand and live in your shoes. Oftentimes, a lot of these injuries can be tangible for a moment, but if they cross over into the emotional pain and suffering side, they're not tangible. It's very difficult for somebody to understand what you're going through. Even too, it's difficult for someone to understand how you went through a surgery and how you're recovering. When you're putting on social media that you're on vacation and you're doing something like you've never skydived in your life and you decided this one time because now you know life is short, you want to skydive, that's great. Please don't put it on social media because you truly, unfortunately, have now ruined your case because no one is going to step back into your shoes and understand that after that skydiving experience, you were in bed for 6 weeks, right? I think the juxtaposition of wanting to live your life, but then showcasing that life it can be a problem because, of course, social media, we know people present a facade, but presenting that facade becomes your reality. So I would say that's my number one. The other thing is not having adequate UIM insurance. It's hard. It's one of my toughest jobs, I think, is to tell people that the person who hit you doesn't have adequate insurance to cover your injuries. It's devastating because I know that people deserve to get better. And I know that people who cause an accident need to take responsibility for that. But what happens, of course, when they can't, meaning there's not enough money there? It's really important to protect yourself and understand that you're worth something. And if you truly value yourself, you understand that people aren't going to understand how to take care of other people. So you know what? Take the responsibility as well. Make sure you have adequate coverage and make sure you can protect yourself, especially in California. We have a lot of drivers. We have fast freeways. We have a great system, but people do get hurt.
Talk to me a little about missing the SR1 filing.
An SR1 is a report of traffic accident occurring in California. That is a DMV form. You must file it within 10 days after your car accident. And any car accident that is involved with injury, unfortunately death, or property damage of over $1,000 or more. It is completely separate from a police report. Any responding police do not file the SR1 form. It's also, by the way, completely separate from an insurance claim. So even if you have contacted your insurance company and you do report your accident, the SR1 DMV form is completely different and you still have to do that. You have to file it, like I said, or send it to them within 10 days. If you don't, you could face a fine, but also worse, you could actually get your license suspended for up to a year. Very problematic. And I think a lot of people don't actually even know that the SR1 form exists. So I think it's imperative that when you're in an accident, that's one of the reasons why accident attorneys exist. We know these things happen, we know the deadlines, and we know how to protect you and keep you safe.
Yeah. What about delayed treatment? Someone gets into a car accident, they feel okay in the moment, and then a week later, they feel they're injured or something is happening to them due to the car accident. So does that hurt the case in any way?
Absolutely. So part of their car accident claim is documentation. It's really important that people understand that you might know what your body's like. You might know what happened, but you're not just asking you to be responsible for your own damages, right? If that's the case, fine, take as long as you need. But you need to be able to essentially convince other people, the other insurance adjusters, the other parties, and if you get to a trial, a jury, that you in fact have the damages that you claim to have from that exact accident. In order to do that, we really have to understand that you have to have a timeline, a picture of what you did. Waiting to treat doesn't help because it really takes away that correlation from the accident to your injury. It breaks it. So you have this beautiful string, it's going along. We understand here's your accident and here's where you started treating. If you don't treat or you stop treating, again, that goes away. That connection is gone. And that can be really incredibly damaging to your claim because, again, people simply aren't going to believe it. It's also the same with, let's say you have recommended treatment. Obviously, nerves are a big part of that, right? People don't love to get medical treatment if they don't need it. I included. But I also know that when I'm sick enough or when something happens to me and I know I have to fix it, I have no choice, regardless of my anxiety or my worries about getting it done. I know I interview doctors and I make sure that I do get it done. There is that really important understanding of you are trying to tell people that you are injured from this accident. You need to go ahead and get the treatment. Not only that, I think of it like that. Trial attorney brain is just very specific, but also you need to help yourself. There's a point in time in which we all believe, as I think any personal injury attorney would tell you, that you won't be able to recover for your injuries. And if you wait too long, you've now really put yourself in a position that, again, your injuries aren't going to be correlated to the accident and you're not going to be able to get better in that way. So that's a huge problem for you. Now you've maybe had a problem that could have been a small issue that has now snowballed into a much, much bigger issue. And then there's, of course, the issue of mitigating your damages. Because you didn't seek treatment, you've now created a bigger medical problem for you. And now who's on the hook for that, right? So there are so many facets to delaying or your medical treatment that could really damage your personal injury case and really damage you as a whole getting better.
And then a lot of people are not sure if their case is big enough to justify calling a lawyer. So what should an Irvine resident actually call a car accident attorney instead of handling the claim solo?
I say every single time. Car accident attorneys, at least for sure, MVP accident attorneys, we are free consultation, free information at that point. So always call. you've been involved in an accident, and unless you know exactly what you're doing, you probably don't know what you're doing. Much like the multiple DMV forms you need to file, the insurance claim you need to deal with, you really need to have an understanding. And then, of course, going to the doctor, you're probably fielding other things in your life because certainly you weren't anticipating this change. You always reach out to an attorney. That's what we're here for. We're here to help you. I always call a specialist if I need help for something. I'm not going to necessarily do it myself, but if I do, it usually doesn't end up going very. So always call an attorney. You don't ever have to feel embarrassed. Just call, pick up the phone. The worst thing that someone can say is, oh, you know what? We don't handle that. Maybe we can help you find someone else, or here's some other people you can call, or you can call someone else. Most attorneys like us, we even have online platforms, right? So you can literally just sit there at any time of day, at any time of night, type it on in, and we can give you a call back. So it takes no time from you at all. And it does make sure that you're protecting yourself.
And then for someone listening right now who has just been in a car accident in Irvine, what is the one thing you want them to remember from this conversation?
Remember that this is a big deal and you need to take care of yourself and get better. The best way to do that is to get an attorney to help you get better as quickly as you can and get back to the way you were before the accident.
Absolutely. If you've been in a car accident in Irvine, Newport Beach, Tustin, or anywhere in Orange County, and you are not sure what to do next, make that call. You can find MVP accident attorneys at themvp.com or call them directly at 833-MVP-WINS. That's 833-MVP-WINS. Thanks for watching, and we will see you on the next episode of the MVP of Personal Injury Law.